is generated from Africa, more recently the Middle East and North America. Certainly in my country, the United States, we're starting to see this as much more of a concern as well. Each of these cases looks very differently from each other. And this in no small way explains some of the reluctance that we've seen, some of the stigmatism to even address this topic. It cannot be understated, Pakistan's recent contribution to understanding CRVE and its contributions to the base of knowledge that's occurring in Pakistan, to South Asia, and its contribution to a global understanding of this phenomena is considerable. This, from where I'm sitting, really marks a watershed moment in the way we're able to approach and understand violent extremism. As a way to take a look at this, let's look at some of the issues that have been studied in Pakistan over the last 24 months. And we know that these types of issues are largely wrapped around security issues, but increasingly we see them as also part of a social issue, a community issue as well. So the research that's been, again, peer-reviewed, that's working towards publication in renowned journals, many of them resident inside of Pakistan, include education, religion, civil society. We're gaining a deeper understanding of youth, women, the psychology of violent extremism, media's engagement to prevent and influence, juvenile justice systems, tribal institution, and community strategies towards preventing violent extremism. So a lot of the research very pointedly is aimed at having an impact on policy, or certainly that impact be able to give voice to some of these concerns, and more importantly, or as importantly, give evidence to these concerns to policymakers. This conference is probably very clear, maybe the best example of that we've seen in quite some time. Creative Learning was invited again to work with SDPI and the State Department for Community Resilience Research Network. This speaks to the sustainability and the impact that we're having on the ground, as well as the will to move forward with increasing this understanding inside of Pakistan. Some of our new counterparts and stakeholders include an expansion of the academic community, members from the National Parliamentary Task Force on the SDGs, local governments, the National Counterterrorism Authority, and the media. We look increasingly at how we can harvest knowledge, how we can increase capacity development at 3 levels: nationally, subnationally, and also through communities. The success of our previous work in this area has led us through this new program to engage in additional research, and that is currently ongoing. And we're picking several, I think it's 3 to 5 still, tightly knit PCVE or CRVE themes, developing an additional 9 policy papers that'll be ushered again by SDPI, and hoping to increasingly have an influence, positive influence on national policy. We also have added to this a more robust advocacy function, and looking at disseminating these messages and this knowledge through the use of increasing media engagement based on evidence-based research. With that, I realize I'm taking up quite a bit of time, and I'm really hoping to be with you all here today. And I will stop there and hand the floor back over to my esteemed colleague, Dr. Shafqat. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dean, for really setting the scene for our discussion today. Dean has rightly pointed out that extremism is not something out of society. It's a very societal issue. So we have to address it as an issue of society. That's why the program we have completed, or we are undergoing now in a next phase, is that we want the community resilience. The point community resilience to violent extremism is because we understand in our analysis that this is a societal issue and this is a development issue as well. So that's why when we talk about sustainable development, we think somewhere sustainable development is harmed also when there is no peace. So that's why it's a very correlated. And here, when we talk about peace, youth's role cannot be denied. In our papers, which Dean has mentioned, we have even paper were talking about the mother and child relation, how a teenage children, how they are grown up, and what role mother can play, or mother's thinking can play on their understanding of society and extremism. So there are a lot of all range of these papers that talk about almost all aspects of Pakistan's terrorism and extremism related issues and their social connotations. Thank you, Dean, once again for your thoughts on that. Earlier, we thought that we will request Khalid Khan Sahab, who is also in Washington. But I tell you, there is a midnight or maybe 2 o'clock in the night in Washington. That's why I do not want to hold more to Khalid Saab, that he is waiting until end of the session. So may I request you, Khalid Saab, for your thoughts. And then in between, if you will have a question to both Mr. Khalid and Mr. Dean, then we will give you the chance to ask question. Then we will move forward for our next segment. Over to you, Khalid Saab.
Sure, sure. Would you like to turn on my camera, or is okay without camera too?
I think better, Khalid Saab.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So my name is Khalid Khan, and I work for Creative Associate as well as Director Project Performance and Risk Mitigation. I have experience of working in Pakistan as well in early 80s. I grew up in Islamabad, so I know Pakistan a little bit. From creative side, let me tell you that Creative has worked in Pakistan for more than 15 years now, or maybe 20. And Creative Associate has implemented some PV, preventive projects in Pakistan, northern areas and southern Punjab. And those projects were from, I think, year 2007 to 2017. And most of those projects included award of small grants for a lot of community engagement activities. And it was to address the issues of the CVE and PVE and align with the government of Pakistan's strategy at that time too. So that was some, complementing government of Pakistan's strategy with working with NECTA as well. In addition to that, Creative Associate has implemented some education project in province of Sindh, and especially the areas which are aligned or adjacent to the southern Punjab. All these projects, what Creative implemented, were actually community-based and at grassroots level, engaging the grassroots level communities for PV. Now, my thoughts on Pakistan, a little bit knowledge. I know that you all are practitioners and you work day and night. I have not been involved in Pakistan programs for the last 10, 15 years, but I was chief of party of a large project of $150 million as well for some time when I was posted in Pakistan. My understanding is that how important it is the community resilience and involvement of community at the grassroots level. There are certain gaps what we have seen over the years. I remember when I was growing up in Pakistan in my teenage, the civic education was a very concrete part of the syllabus in education. And now I've seen all of those kind of civic education part is kind of waning off, and I do not see those things part of the curriculum. Now, parents' engagement in schools and education is also kind of waning off in the school committees. I know that they are required by design in certain provinces and certain areas, but it is not implemented in good spirit. We tried to reinstitute all of those things under our projects in Pakistan when we did, but I just do not see that thing happening very effectively. My understanding is that involvement of communities and teaching civic education would really help communities to have resilience and understanding of their civic responsibilities. And that is an area, actually, I think that very important to bring the resilience in communities and understand the civic responsibilities until and unless and as I was saying, that when I was in my teenage and going in Islamabad, we used to have a real good close network of communities and close knowledge. Everyone knew each other, because I used to tell that before, when I was in a school, if something happens in the school before, and the news will get to my home before I would get back, and my parents would know, and parents knew each other. And all of those kind of, I know that the population has increased in Pakistan, but still some of the civic sense is also not so very well inculcated in the communities now. We tried to do all of this thing under our projects since, during the period of 2007 and 2017. And actually the education project was also a pretty large project. That was $150 million project, working with the provinces for their own. As you know, the education is the provincial subject. We worked with all provinces in Pakistan. But I just think that the community resilience, the civic education and civic engagement, both are very integral part of the community resilience. And that is the gap I find very much in all provinces. With that, I would like to hear from all of you that what is happening, so that if we can offer any help and our expertise, we will be very much welcoming, Dean and I, and we can help you from here in any respect. We are always there to help you. Thank you very much, Dr. Shafkat.
Thank you, Khalid Saab, for your thoughts. I think you are right that when we talk about extremism and educating people and civic education, that ultimately provide us some solutions. That's why in our research papers, there are some papers who are specifically focusing, and some of the paper or the policy paper, they have focused on the education side of it, on curriculum side, on the teacher education. There are many issues related to education, but you are rightly mentioned here, somehow probably not explicitly, we could not cover the civic education. And thank you very much for pointing it out. We will next time take care of it, and we will promote the civic education part more on it. Thank you, Khalisa, for your contribution. Now from the podium, I would request for special remarks, Dr. Arshi Salim Qureshi. Dr. Arshi is an expert on Hashmi, sorry. Yeah, Dr. Arshi Salim Hashmi. She's expert on religious violent conflict, counter-violent extremism, and conflict resolution with special focus on South Asia. She currently heads the Department of Peace and Conflict Studies at National Defense University, Islamabad. Dr. Arshi has been a fellow with the Oxford University. So many awards are here. So I would not be standing in between. Over to you, Dr. Arshi.
Thank you, Shafti Saab. Um, I think I need to update my CV. So I have just completed my tenure as HOD, the head, and now I have more time to give on research activities and other things. It's just that this month, yeah. As the introduction has already been given about the project that was being carried out, my association with that in the capacity of one of the advisors, and also to refresh my knowledge while going through all those different or attending those discussions and the chapter meetings that SDPI arranged, they were quite helpful. When it comes to the CVE and in fact PCVE, preventing countering violent extremism, I mean, how do I see it? Well, I see it more than what generally is taken as within the security paradigm. I see it more as politics, policy, and governance. So once you deal with those things, you have some control of those areas which can actually contribute in deteriorating the situation, which may appear to be normal political issues. But then what we have found out in our studies, various studies, and in fact under this project also, that somehow or other they're all connected with the politics or the policy or the governance. So from the, when we talk about the true strategy to deal with violent extremism, I think prevention or preventing the next crisis by focusing on the root causes is something that is, that is supposed to be more focused on. Moving from reactive to proactive. I mean, what we have seen in last 20 years, of course, dealing with the at the government level or at this grassroots level, different organizations. I mean, it is more of a reactive action or policies that something has happened and now you have to take action to control that. How about some proactive policies or interventions that can actually they may not appear to be, something that you're taking to directly hit the problem, but then they have the capacity to actually deal with the potential conflict or potential issues. Now, those potential conflicts, they may not appear to be violent conflict, but then they have the potential. So that is why we have to take those preventive, proactive actions that can actually help. How do we do that? As discussed earlier also, I mean, it is through community. Because no matter what the top-down approach, I mean, it remains sort of invalid community which is really engaged and actively working for that. So this is where community resilience also comes in. And what exactly it is, of course, it is and diplomacy. In other words, in a more of a governance, politics, and policy framework. So unlike traditional security-centric approach, I think it is more of a people-centric approach that we are talking about. I mean, we have to have that clarity that when we talk about CVE, we are talking about people-centric approach. If we engage and indulge in CVE with the state-centric approach, we are only trying to sort of manage the crisis. We are trying to deal with the violence that is there. And then, of course, within that security paradigm, it is the people-centric approach that you have to take. With that approach in mind, you're taking those sustainable development, sustainable peace, initiatives that can actually contribute in creating not only resilience, but also dealing with the potential conflict. What is expected here? I think as we study in peace and conflict studies, we call it a structural violence. Dealing with the structural violence is the key. I mean, if we don't really have an idea about the structural violence, or we just deal with them, the regular political issues, then we are actually making mistake. So only looking for the physical violence or the negative piece would not help. Last 20 years in our own, when we talk about Pakistan, obviously our focus has been on state-centric approach primarily. Of course, there are organizations and groups of NGOs and CBOs who tried their best, but primarily speaking, it has been the state-centric approach that we have to secure the territory and we have to establish the writ of the state. So because there are groups who are challenging the writ of the state, we have to take action. And that action is, of course, physical. You take those action in the form of different operations, which were successful in dealing with those declared terrorist group. But how about the society? The society which was fast being radicalized. What you are exactly doing there? So there was frustration, deprivation, anger, humiliation, and that developed into revenge. And then, of course, this continued repercussions that we see even now, even after the successful completion of some of the operations that we had taken against the declared terrorist groups. What about the society? So the society, along with that, whatever was happening, unfortunately, it could not really come up with or come out of that vicious circle where they were the victims, they were the ones who were affected by the things that were taken, not just by what the terrorists were doing, but of course by the action taken by the state in the form of dealing with the terrorists, because you needed support in dealing with those people also who were affected, internal displacement and all those different loss of job and other things. I mean, that also contributed in frustration. And of course, these are the larger issues that we have to, and countries like us have to deal with. Now, one of the important thing is PCVE. It targets the social fabric. In a multi-ethnic, multi-religious sectarian society, we require separate models which need to be locally analyzed. It's not that, it's the one size fit model that can be applied. Stable political environment, I'm the believer in that. I mean, if you don't have a stable political environment, no matter what you propose, it's not going to work. You have to have thriving political system. You call it democracy in one form or other form or whatever, but it's people's participation. People feel, or they must feel a sense of belonging, a sense of ownership. Only then all such efforts, they'll be, you can call them successful. Otherwise, they'll remain somewhere along, on the margins, but not really effective. So politics is important. A stable political system is important. And of course, there is this debate about development security nexus, and that has to really, I mean, we really need to see that, okay, so we need development only because we need security, and how we define security. If we are not defining security in terms of political participation or a sense of participation among the people, then it's not really security, because comprehensive security is where people have this sense of belonging and sense of political participation, that they actually participate in the decision making. If they don't, then we'll continue to have such things, short-term projects, short-term things, and then eventually another thing in another shape with another problem will turn up. So one of the things that is important, I think, talking about the countering violent extremism, is the intervention. I mean, we do talk about different models and different things, but evaluating the impact, as I said earlier. So evaluating the impact is crucial to understanding what does and does not work, and to identifying and mitigating any potentially negative unintended consequences of the program. I mean, we generally obviously are too focused on the positive side of it, that it will help. But along with that, while doing that, there are unintended consequences of certain things. What do we really have any policies to deal with them? Do we really think that they are important, or those consequences are important, or we think that only that particular objective that we have in mind to create a secure environment, or to establish law and order is enough? So this all those different consequences are also required. One of the things is about the, as I said, evaluating the CVE programs. What is definitely you focus on the specific programs, but then the larger context is also important. We need to look across individual projects and consider the larger context in which initiatives are implemented. So while we are successfully completing those projects, how do we see the impact of those projects that are being completed on the larger society? Are they creating problems, or are they facilitating the society to really deal with that? The developing the local informed lexicon and indicators in PCVE programs are also important. The dynamics are local, although one successful intervention can inform others. So we can have different lessons, and we do say that best practices and the lessons from other places. But then there are limits to transferring learning and practices across contexts. I mean, contextual in knowledge and information is really, really, really important. A lot of mess that we see is because we, I think, believe what more than what we should, believing and doing that because something has worked somewhere and that was the best practice can work here also. Understanding the nature and type of relationship on community level that restrain the influence of violent extremism is a critical direction for the field and can potentially enhance the effectiveness of PCV intervention and effort to evaluate the impact. PCV, I would say, is or countering violent extremism, preventing and countering violent extremism is more than developing a counter narrative. If you have this particular objective in mind, that that we are doing it because we have to come up with a counter narrative, then obviously it's a very narrow objective in this regard. It is more of a, as was stated before, more of a governance, societal change, and political participation and economic stability framework and intervention. In Pakistan's context, we have to address some fundamental issues. And it was mentioned by Khalid Saab, I think, about the civic education. I think is peace education. If we, we can really sort of come up with the, a framework where we can have not just civic education, but also civic education is actually the core. And then there are certain other things. So this peace education, how to develop, or if not develop separately, but having some, aspects of them in the curriculum is important. Intervention model should not be seen challenging the norms, ideas, values in societies like ours. It becomes counterproductive, and we've been dealing with that. So we deal with the counterproductive ideas and things, and then we come up with dealing with them again. And then the cycle, it continues. And we have not really been able to successfully come out of it. An important perspective to consider is while dealing with various groups involved in extremism, one thing that is perhaps some people have taken it into consideration, but not many, is that that we are too focused on the ideology. So there are followers of a certain ideology, but then there are other contexts also. So the followers maybe, they may be following certain ideology, but they have different approach and orientation to actually work in that. So this is, and then the sympathizers, most of the time we think that they are, because they are not really members of those groups, terrorist groups, so they don't come in the radar. But once they are the sympathizers, and this is one of the important issues in the context of Pakistan, because they are the sympathizers, but they are in the mainstream politics also. They are not the formal members or the members as such of any such group, but they have those tendencies that they believe in those ideas. But once they become part of the political, any political party, or they come in mainstream, obviously they take those ideas in the parliament or in the policy making circle, and that makes the thing difficult. But they do not come in the radar because they are not the members of the groups. So why would anybody take action? And then we deal with them. And of course, finally, when I talk about the impact, it's the long-term impacts that we really have to see. And then related to that, it's about the people, but then the ideology. Obviously, extremist groups are not just the religious groups. So I think there is this time to see what else is going on in the society also. Political extremism is also one of the things that is contributing in making the society. So those different groups and different movements who could be creating problem, we need to come up with different program. We can't really implement those programs which are designed to deal with those religiously motivated and mobilized groups. How would you deal with, and if you try to deal with those groups, the political groups, with those ideas which are designed for the religious groups, then there is a problem. And this is the problem I think we are seeing, seeing in the society. So I would just wrap up, otherwise I will continue and then this is not right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Arshi. Really, we were mesmerized and listening a lot of things from you, and right from the identifying of the issues to fixing of the associated things, analysis, and finally the recipes. Thank you, Dr. Arshi. A time constraint, otherwise we would not have stopped you. Sometime maybe have your talk specially on that. Thank you so much. And with this, our first segment finishes here, which was of the special remarks. Now we will move on to our researchers, panelists, who have with them their researches, a lot of things they have to tell us. But I am afraid that, you know, the time constraints are there. So my request would be that they should contain their deliberations within limits. So we have time until 2 o'clock. Yeah. So with this, within these 40 minutes, we have, you know, maybe 8 minutes, for 7 to 8 minutes for all the 4 speakers. Then maybe some time left for question and answer. Is that okay? Thank you very much. So to begin with, I will again move to the colleagues, those who are waiting online. And may I request Dr. Sarish Qayyum. She is an assistant professor at Pakistan Navy War College. She has been wonderful researcher. She has contributed her paper here with our project. And now her topic is, which she will present here, is community resilience to countering violent extremism, Pakistan's perspective of internal security in National Security Plan 22-26. I think very important topic. But my request again is, Dr. Sarish, please, you know, wind up within 7 to 8 minutes. Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Sarish.
Hello, assalamu alaikum everyone who is there, and I wish I would have been there, but I'm thankful to the panelists and especially the chair who has given me this opportunity for being online here and to address. Sir, I'll try to be very precise and very limited in my talk, being related to the naval officers and all that. You know, we are very precise with the timing. Let me discuss a very important topic, that is the community resilience to the countering violent extremism. This is a very hot topic, and particularly when it comes towards the national security policy. Yes, it is, because in the national security policy, we have discussed the various chapters, and the most important chapter related to the countering violent extremism was internal security. That was the section number 6. Can you please move to the next slide? Because before discussing the national security policy and then the internal security section, we need to discuss that how the things are being shifted towards extremism. Let me very briefly add this important aspect, that social ignorance is actually the basic, the embryonic stage of extremism. And when it gets evolved, when it gets attract the things much more, the violence around in the society, it turns into the violence, the worst form. And then violence turns into the extremism. This is a continuous process. And if I give you an example, that is the target killing, murders, gender violence, and many other such social environment, or the acts of terrorism, that is actually increasing the importance of countering violent extremism. Because once the violence is initiated, it's like a fission reaction. You can't control until and unless the root causes are being eliminated. Can you please move to the next slide? And then we see that how these CVE approaches are being changed, or the concept is being adopted. That is, the global war and the terror changed the violence concept. Why I'm saying this, because before 9/11, the situation was different. The countering and preventing approaches were different. They were not that much violent. But right after global war and terror, the things were changed. And the things changed in such a manner that multi-level factors were contributing to the situation from individual level, because when the terrorist acts are working or happening, they first impact the individual mindset, and then they move towards the families, the communities, then they are having a far-reaching effects at the national level, and then the transnational, because every country is attached to the other countries, mean their neighborhood. So when we are talking about the regional security complex, it is actually dealing with the same concept of a multi-level factor analysis of violent extremism, that if I am affected, of course, my premises, my acquaintance will be affected. Please move next. And then we come towards the multiple occurring system. I was saying that if I'm affected due to any violent activity, of course, my acquaintance will be affected, because it will give us some sort of a psychological impact on my own self. Then I would be transferring that impact to the society. And of course, the environmental and education system is affected. Political and legal sectors are affected on the higher level, because whenever the substance is disturbed, or the individuals in a societies are targeted, it affects the political system, it affects the government, and it push on the pressure that how to deal with the situation. And in turns, of course, turning on the global indicators of violent extremism, that how now the threshold has been passed and we have to change the cultural norms, we have to change the strategies to counter them. Please move next. Okay, most importantly, why I'm touching it post 9/11, because post 9/11 factors, religion-based violence was increased, because the launch of ISIS, Islamism-inspired violence in Middle East was a major factor, which was giving a new color to the violent extremism in this duration. And then if I talk about the political polarization, because if I'm currently talking about in our own societies recently passed from the last 3 years, the society has been altogether changed. We have shifted from them to the us narrative, and now towards us versus them, because we are thinking about our own self. We are thinking if we are safe, everything is fine, but we are not thinking about the society. So whatever the act of the violence either happening at the individual level or the social and the national level, it will affect all of the participants or all the individuals present in one society. Then the most important dimension is multi-systemic, means culture shocks and the terrorist happenings. Then the next stage moves as a multi-scale, means the severity of the incident and the intensity of the incident. Both are the major reasons that what kind of impact will be observed on the individual who is being targeted. Please move next. Okay, then I'm talking about the Hershey's, the most important concept of a social bond, because these are the things on which, or on the basis of which, we are attached to the whole society. Means there is a sense of attachment, our commitment to some specific task, then involvement of the individuals, and then the belief system. Because it is our belief system that how we absorb the violent happenings around us, because countering violent extremism or preventing violent extremism currently is not done that properly, or I can say the strategies have proven insufficient, because the nature of environment or the nature of conflict, the nature of violence is continuously changing. Kindly move next. Okay, then Travis' control theory, on which is actually developed on the base of these 4 important dimensions of the social bond. He says that the crime as a result of social institution is because social institution lose control over the individual. And what happens? The type of institutions which are impacted are families, are locals in the communities, and then traversing that effect to the national level. Means if we can say that there is a lack of trust among the government and the policymakers and then the implementers. This is the major reason that how the control of system of or the control of one individual impacts the whole society. Can you please move next? Okay, then if I very precisely or take out the two important dimensions that how these areas are being affected by the violence, that is a typical delinquent. Means if a young, single, unemployed male is considered the most probable or the vulnerable entity towards the violence. But when we say that the person is employed or is married or is socially committed, means he is less likely to incline towards the violent extremist happenings or towards the violence. And if I say the very precise extraction of the Travis theory that involved that individuals who are involved and are the part of a social institutions, they are less likely to go into different dimensions, or I can say they don't go astray. So the three most important probable dimensions which are actually responsible for the rate of violent extremism are the absentees parents. Means if the parents are not looking after their children and they're not focusing how their behavior is changing, or the complete absence of the social environment, and thirdly, the most importantly, unemployment, which is actually direct hit on the socioeconomic status of an individual. So these things actually amalgamate, they are attached, interlinked, that how the violence is being developed within the societies. Can you please move next? Okay. Why I am talking was actually a background where I was developing. And the most important thing that Pakistan adopted national internal security policy from 2018 to 2023, and it was the most important step to counter the violent extremism. Can you please move next? We are focusing on the four important dimensions, that what was the focus, its objectives, then what was the strategies and the flaws. The focus on the national NISP 2018 was administrative, means how the state is countering or handling or responding to the issues, and then ideational, means what was the ideology behind every narrative coming from the society, and what is a socio-economic status, means when the socio-economic status is disturbed, it enters into the disturbance in society and henceforth running towards the security breach or the security contacts where we need to control them. Can we move towards the objectives, please? Yes. The objectives of NISP was the enforcement of law, the integration of the society and the shared intelligence, and then setting up a society or the norms or thresholds to reach the social justice. NISP actually followed the 6R strategy, means it was reimagining the whole concept of violence, then reconciling that what factors can be joined together. Redistancing means how to think about and how to integrate the new institutions and assigning their particular jobs, then recognizing their exact placement of working. Then regional approach means every approach had to be considered that who is your neighbor, who is your acquaintance, what is the geographical position, and how you have to respond to the violence. And at the end, reorienting according to the situation, according to the changing environment, or according to the changing political regime. So out of these all things, what I found that NISP 2018 was having a bit of a flaws. What those flaws were, actually, yes, those flaws were, once there was no ownership of a subsequent government. Means if the policy is launched, the next upcoming government must have its ownership to continue the process of counter-violent extremism and the smoothness in the society. So there was no proper implementation plan, and there was no proper mechanism of integration between the government and the law enforcement agencies. And very painfully, I'm saying that this policy stayed on papers, because until and unless it is not implemented, we cannot have its effects. So I come towards the National Security Policy of Pakistan 2022-26. this was an other step, a next step towards developing a more precise policy, more precise contours. So I'm just only focusing on the section 6, the internal security matters, which is related to the counter-violence extremism. The broad contours of this NSP policy was that we have to focus on national security and the human security as well, because national security is attached to the human security. Then secondly, that we have to focus on the national non-traditional security threats, and particularly from the subnationalist and the extremist entities who are actually contributing or adding into the non-traditional security threat status currently of the Pakistan. And lastly, the other broad contour was the non-tolerance towards the violence and sectarianism. Until and unless these factors do not cover, internal security is almost impossible to gain. Can we move next, please? Okay, just summing up my talk, we are focusing on the analysis that.
So, we are short of time, just brief it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Right. So again, the same issue, we don't have an implementation plan, the lack of institutional integration, but it can be gained. That is subject to the good governance, because internal security is actually based on this. And then we move towards how these things have to be integrated. Please move next. And then means the political stability has to be achieved, particularly by strengthening NACTA, so that counterterrorism activities have to be streamlined. Then measures against regional development. And at the end, I just wanted to add up that if there is a question, the TTP ceasefire is ended single-handedly, the violence continues and all other things, what is the question? If we are not able to achieve or implement the policies, we are yet lacking at countering violent extremism. So we have to focus on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Saresh, for a wonderful paper. And we hope that this paper will be soon completed and then it will be published. Thank you so much. I will not summarize because I want to save some time. Let's move to our next speaker, Mr. Saifullah Hassan Rana. He is a PhD scholar at University of Karachi. Mr. Rana will be presenting us now on the topic is evaluating the present legislation and criminal justice system against violent extremism in Pakistan, proposing effective laws for resilient communities. Over to you, Rana sir. Saifullah Rana. Please, just observe the time. Huh? That's my request. Thank you. Okay, over to you. We cannot hear you. Yes, it's okay. Carry on. There is a problem with your voice. Can you volume up or just come closer to the mic?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Let us try to hear.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, now it's okay. Carry on.
Yes, it's audible now. Is it audible?
Yes, clearly.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, distinguished panelist and dear Dr. Shafkat Saab. It's an honor to address this prestigious Sustainable Development Conference. And congratulations to you, first of all, for arranging such a wonderful conference. And it has always been an honor and privilege to be a part of the activities of SDPI related to countering violent extremism. And once again, so moving on quickly towards the topic, and like Dr. Shafkat Saab has introduced me already as a PhD scholar in University of Karachi Law and Justice. My another introduction is that I am presently serving as civil judge in Karachi and having a keen interest on the law-related issues regarding the countering violent extremism. So the topic of my studies, basically these are studies that I've conducted. One is for evaluating the present legislation, and then another one is the criminal justice system, efficacy of the criminal justice system of Pakistan in countering violent extremism in the different cases.
think there is a problem with the internet. Maybe we can hear you later. Okay, if you're okay, we will invite you later. So let's move on to our panelist here. Can I request Dr. Syed Hussain Saeed Sowarwardi Sahab, Department of International Relations, he is chairman there. The topic is community resilience as a component of the National Action Plan. Over to you. Dr. साहब, आप भी टीचर हैं, तो रिक्वेस्ट वही टाइम की है, क्योंकि आप तो 3 घंटे का भी लेक्चर है.
I'll just take 30 minutes, don't worry. Yeah. Thank you so much for providing me with this opportunity to share some thoughts about my research work. I am extremely short of time, so what I am going to focus more on is the data that I collected for this research that I am going to share with you, especially that primary data when I spoke with the people about violent extremism and community resilience, how this is so threatening to the security of Pakistan, and in the last 2 decades that has been taking place. And when I spoke about political goals of these organizations which believe in such violence, ideologically motivated violence, or otherwise, I spoke with many people who were concerned with that. I went to some of the tribal areas, and in Khyber Agency, when I spoke with a very particular man who was in the hub of affairs, a religious leader basically, and I had expected something otherwise from him. His response was, religion is not responsible for extremism. In fact, it's the approach of every individual towards religion. How you take it is more important than what it says. Religion has been constantly misinterpreted. He further added, there are more people who find peace in the religion than those who become extremists in the name of religion. So now, who is correct? Majority of peace or minority of extremism? Unquote. That was really very interesting when a religious leader is speaking about religious extremism, and he is trying to compartmentalize his own kind of people from those. So this means that within religious extremism, there are many who do not associate themselves with them. They rather dissociate themselves from that. From another one, Khanzali Shinwari and Salim Khan Kuki Khel, they were also from the same district, that is Khyber. And in contrast, when I spoke with them, they spoke very differently. The question was the same. And their response was just, once again, I quote, and they both said, they both responded, jihad is an important part of Islam. It is a conspiracy that jihad is equated with extremism or terrorism. When I asked if Taliban fighting in Afghanistan or in Pakistan are extremists, or they were jihadists, their response was very simple, and that was, they are our Muslim brothers and we must help them. If we cannot help them, at least we must support them verbally by not equating jihad with extremism. So imagine I am speaking with a religious leader. He's condemning religious extremism, whereas I'm speaking with common man, and both of them are somehow, one way or the other, they are very positively talking about our jihadis, our brothers. Well, they are, we may have disagreements with them, but they are our brothers and we need to support them. We need to be very careful about them. In the same manner, when these terrorist organizations pay huge amounts of money to unemployed youth and they get them over to themselves, we say that poverty is the mother of all socio-economic problems. Another interview was really very interesting, and that was that people from our village were employed to fight against Western forces in Afghanistan in the name of Islam. yes, they were also paid, and this payment was enough for running kitchen of their families. And this gentleman whose name is Asal Alam, he's from North Waziristan, and this interview took place in Yekan. He further said that upon their return to their home villages, which means the people who migrated from Waziristan to Yekan settled areas, they found Pakistani forces fighting shoulder to shoulder with American army. Hence, they thought that Pakistan was also allied with the US in their fight with Afghan Muslim brethren. And later on, he told me that because Pakistan Army's soldiers' uniform was more or less the same like American soldiers. So therefore, they said that therefore, they took up arms against Pakistani forces and got more recruitment from their villages. So that kind of confusion is also taking place. We sometimes oversimplify things, academically speaking. But there, when we go inside and speak with the people, we realize that there are many other things that may become the reason. This Asal Alam's account is a clear evidence of the recruitment of terrorists from their communities. So to eliminate this cancer of terrorism or extremism from society, it is necessary to empower the local communities against it, because they know and they understand what are the causes. A person's capacity to withstand any adverse condition is in fact called resilience, and that we are here speaking about. In the same manner, there was one school teacher of Wana. His name is Salim Mahsood. He's from South Waziristan. He was living in DA Khan when this interview took place. And that was really very interesting what he responded. We didn't know what is the objective of Pakistani government and its army. Very recently, they came up with the bold pronouncements of what they wanted. However, this was too little, too late. Community had become by now a hub of terrorist and extremist recruitment. Had they produced more awareness about their own objectives and exposed terrorists' nefarious designs, life would have been different. There wouldn't have been so much of terrorism, and resultantly, there wouldn't have been such a vast scale of terrorist recruitment from our society, unquote. So this also reflects what society speaks from a different segment. And this different segment is, we can say, an educated lot. A school teacher is speaking in this language. I am going directly now to some other responses, and that is misinterpretation of religion by non-state as well as the state actors in this entire hub of affairs. One political activist from the ruling party in DA Khan, he stated something really very interesting, and his name was Sayyid Yasir Shah. Society emerged as disjointed, fractured, and confused about the state's political system, role of religion in governance, and wholehearted efforts to eradicate extremism. So because society was so confused, therefore, things started propping up. He also says, further to that, General Zia's Islamization plan proved counterproductive. He neither succeeded in bringing a complete Islamic system in the country, nor left it to a secular entity of 1960s and 70s in Pakistan. He left it in limbo where secular and his own supported and encouraged extremist forces collided time and again. Pakistan became a victim of Frankenstein effect. A peaceful religious minority community started dictating its terms on majority Pacific moderate Muslim community, unquote. So from the same community, that is DA Khan, people are now speaking more openly about who is in fact the one responsible for the situation that they were engulfed in. One very interesting other interview that I conducted in Peshawar was from Dr. Mufti Almas Gul, who was a research fellow in Peshawar, and she responded the 20 points national action plan that government of Pakistan had given after 2014 has missed out working on some fundamental issues. For example, working against the recruitment of terrorists. Undoubtedly, most of these terrorists are young Pakistani nationals, and they are recruited by the terrorist organizations for different reasons, including ideology, monetary gains, and belonging to the neglected segment of society. Revised curriculum in universities and colleges against extremism and tolerance for other faiths, sects, and ethnic minority, consulting university students while devising policies of national security, and working towards the betterment of the neglected segment of society, as well as engaging youth in positive activities, can work against this menace we are engulfed in, unquote. Dr. Gul, this comment was from another perspective, one professor in University of Peshawar. Then he responded to this comment, and his comments are also interesting. He says that there is a dire need for changing the governmental modus operandi from killing, firefighting to working on community. He says that, as mentioned above, gatekeepers are numerous and have propensity to act vehemently and enthusiastically. But the passive role of NACTA for community resilience is discouraging. He further stated, the professor says, teachers, journalists, policemen, society, civil society, religious scholars are ready for playing their active role in softening attitudes of the community. They are trusted and respected a lot, and therefore they can play a very constructive and positive role. However, managing and streamlining their roles under NACTA is a requirement for now, that is unquoted. Another professor, Dr. Syed Irfan Ashraf, I'm just going to take another 1 minute and then I'll finish. And he says that, and he's from journalism, he says that once community resilience is included in National Action Plan, which is still not there, and one of the purposes of this research project was to include community resilience as 21st core component of National Action Plan. He says that once community resilience is included in National Action Plan, every aspect of society will start playing its constructive and contributive role in eradicating extremism and preaching tolerance and peace in the society. Any community service of an imam of masjid, a teacher, a journalist, a policeman, or any government servant without government patronage is counterproductive. He also says that people want recognition of their services as per law, and this is possible only once the community resilience is included in National Action Plan. So this all interviews, some of the interviews that I have included as part of my research reflects what society thinks from the tribal areas, from the settled areas, as well as from the areas that we are so scared of. And we think that that is preparing extremists. It is not, in fact, the society that is preparing. It is, in fact, the way we are dealing with them that is going other way around, and therefore we are the ultimate sufferers. I stop here. Any question, I am there to answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Hussain, for weaving in all the interviews in a very policy manner. Thank you so much for narrating these things. Now I would request Dr. Farhan Zahid, Commandant Police Training, Quetta. Please, would you like to come here? And let me tell you, his PhD and specialization is on terrorism studies. Over to you, Dr. Come.
Thank you, Shafqat Saab and SDPI, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Before I coming up to this topic, because I'll be really quick because of the time constraints, what extremism is all about? Actually, it's all about community. It's all about you. I see a lot of plenty of young students here. And for just let me give you very briefly about what extremism is about. Extremism is precursor to terrorism. Not every extremist actually or eventually becomes a terrorist, but everyone has to follow the path. They follow this path and finally become and adopt means and ways for violence and perpetrate terrorist attack or many different things. How do we measure a person? How do we see in a person that he or she has developed such tendencies, extremist tendencies? It's not only related to religion, like Islamist extremism. Whenever you see a person with some absolutist tendencies, Manichaean tendencies, apocalyptic ideas, nihilistic ideas, you see. So these are the signs that this person has started to develop such, violent extremism or extremist tendencies. For our young colleagues here, I would like to, because I'm a police officer by profession and a practical man, but in the field, but also I'm an academic. So for you, I would say, how do we define violent extremism? The CVE refers to the measures taken by the governments and the civil society organizations to contain, deter, and eventually address the underlying causes of violent extremism. So this is all about how do we do that, and what is the raison d'être of our to achieve our intended objectives. As a concept, CVE gained currency in academic circles in 2015 when the Obama administration hosted a summit at the White House. So after that, we started to know about what CVE is. Before that, we haven't heard this term. Before that, we only studied terrorism, counterterrorism, and used to say de-radicalization, counter-radicalization. So this term started to gain currency after that. So in Pakistan, because we have a very rich landscape, as far as the terrorist organizations are concerned. But we have taken certain measures. It's debatable whether they are how much they are successful. The CV measures are considered essential for sustainable counterterrorism and counter-extremism policies. They provide the balance between the kinetic, the hard ones, and non-kinetic, the soft measures of addressing the counterterrorism related issues. Providing resources, a sense of direction, and equipping the communities, because again, I would say it's all about communities, particularly the youth, our youth, you people, to achieve this. The major objective of any CVE policy is to create a counter narrative against extremist ideologies. I reiterate here that it's a war of ideas. So through policy and academic research, to be effective, every CVE strategy must be contextual and cognizant of the extremist milieu of a particular society. We have to consider this society, Pakistan, we live here. In Pakistani context, I would say CVE can be defined as countering radical narratives disseminated by jihadist and Islamist terrorist organizations to promote intolerance and values which may directly or indirectly contribute to the growing cycle of violence extremism in the country. Pakistan has adopted certain measures in the past, and now we are also working on it. For example, militant and de-radicalization and rehabilitation programs, you might recall in SWAT. Reforms and other laws such as NAP, Madrasa Reform, multiple amendments in Anti-Terrorist Act. And of course, policy measures like National Internal Security Policy and National Counter-Extremist Violence Policy guidelines, which were given by NACTA. In addition to government-led CVE measures, the civil society in Pakistan has taken a number of measures as well. For instance, the number of institutes, for example, SDPI, Pakistan Institute of Peace Studies, they also conducted different research, moved to the communities, went there, discussed them, ran certain programs, conducted certain other training courses also. SDPI has also conducted a number of studies, including causes of radicalization in Pakistan, life histories of radicalized individuals, I was part of that, so I would like to all of you to read that. While concluding, I would say there is a need for realization in Pakistan that without implementing CVE measures for current issues, our current problems, and the resurgence of terrorism in Pakistan, you see KPK and Baluchistan, they are again engulfed by terrorist attacks. Almost we hear every day, we hear a terrorist attack in KPK or in Baluchistan. So what is required here? Because the country has been fighting these Islamist terrorist groups since 2001, but hitherto does not have a comprehensive counter-terrorism policy. We don't have one. And its implementation also, because we also have NISP, it has not been implemented yet, and we have national security policy as well. So the issue is with implementation. With no proper framework of counter-terrorism policy, it appears that Pakistan's success against terrorist group will remain limited. That's what I believe. The need is to formulate a concrete counterterrorism strategy and implement it in letter and spirit, with all encompassing all the essential tools and a roadmap, of course, in order to implement with an implementation mechanism as well. Policymakers at the moment, I would say, they need to evaluate the resurgence of Islamist terrorism in Pakistan. And that's going to be another big issue which is coming up. And the success and failures of CVE measures, which we have implemented during the last 1.5 decades, and devise a functional strategy along with the community and all of the stakeholders for its implementation. I would say in the last, finally, I would say the current situation is quite grim. After the fall of Kabul administration, the national government of Afghanistan, things have started to become real difficult for Pakistan as well. So that's one issue we need to really look into. For your questions are welcome afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Saf, for narrating us the actions which have been taken place. And the story he told us about the definitions, that's very interesting. Earlier, we were avoiding words even, and he told us how this, these words came into discussion. Thank you, Dr. Saf. Now we have Saifullah Saab online. Over to you, Saifullah Saab, if you can open the mic. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, this is okay now. And thank you.
Wonderful.
Carry on. Yeah.
Wonderful. My pleasure, sir. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, with the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most gracious. First of all, I would like to convey my gratitude, my utmost thanks to SDPI and Dr. Shafkat for inviting me to this wonderful occasion at the conference, prestigious conference. I'm extremely honored to have been a part of the SDPI projects against countering violent extremism, which is a part of my PhD studies as well. And most importantly, by virtue of my job, the nature of my job, which is being the judicial magistrate, I deal with so many such cases when the accused person is brought before the court for the first time, produced before the court. So I have been dealing with so many things and related to the countering violent extremism, and it was my privilege to put my practice into research, all thanks to SDPI and Dr. Shafkat Saab. Maybe please have the slides so that I can start off quickly. Wonderful. Yes, the title of the study was Evaluating the Present Legislation and Criminal Justice System Against Violent Extremism in Pakistan, Proposing Effective Laws for Resilient Communities. That was basically a multi-dimensional approach. First of all, I have assessed the present legislation, the legislative framework against violent extremism in Pakistan and its efficacy, and then the efficacy of the Pakistan's criminal justice system. So the research studies comprehensively evaluate the current legislative framework and present criminal justice system. The most important thing is that this study, which was supported and motivated by the SDPI from its projects, was basically a pioneering study because the study aimed to identify and distinguish the striking difference between the act of extremism with the act of terrorism. Because the legislation in Pakistan and the courts in Pakistan are still unable to decide that which acts are falling under the ambit of terrorism and which acts are falling under the ambit of extremism. The study was done in the legal parlance of the Pakistani society in juxtaposition with the ruling of the Honorable Supreme Court of Pakistan. The Honorable Supreme Court of Pakistan, in its criminal appeal number 95 and 96 of the year 2019, the judgment was authored by the then Chief Justice of Pakistan, Honorable Mr. Justice Asif Saeed Khosa. The crux of the judgment was that only those acts which are falling under the ambit of political violence, religious violence, and sectarian violence or extremism will come under the definition of the terrorism, because the section 6 of the Anti-Terrorism Act 1997 of Pakistan is too broad that it rather creates confusion. And this gives the leverage to so many other people to misuse and abuse the process of law by nominating so many people in the FIR, the first information report, on the personal vendetta as well. Whereas the case is not of the same nature as that of the extremism or terrorism. The study basically further analyzed the conventional limits to academic, linguistic, psychological, and ethnic dimensions. I have discussed in my papers in my research study that extremism is linguistic as well. Extremism can be gender centric as well. The social profiling and the psychological profiling of the accused person as well. And then the fourth, and I believe the most important stakeholder of the criminal justice system, the prison. Prisons world over are known and used for the reformative centers, the Center for Reformation. Whereas unfortunately in Pakistan, if a person goes into the prison, next time around, he will come as a hardened criminal, unfortunately, but that is a sad state of affairs. Next slide, please. We have an exercise. Thank you very much. The prevailing laws of the land are questioned in view of the constitutional provision to safeguard the fundamental rights of the resilient citizens in Pakistan, most importantly, the minorities in Pakistan. Another aspect identified is the performance of investigation, prosecution, providing security to witness. We do have a program on the piece of paper that is a Witness Protection Act, but its efficacy is still yet to be ascertained. The victim, as well as other elements of criminal justice, including judicial system. Low conviction rate in anti-terrorism courts itself speaks of the performance of the investigation and prosecution. Why I'm saying investigation and prosecution? Because the findings of the study, and most importantly, the literature available in this particular regard has always pointed out that because of the poor investigation, the weak prosecution, the accused persons normally takes the benefit of doubt. The benefit of doubt in the law of sentencing basically gives the leverage, the margin to the accused person, which is extended to the accused person, and as a result, the accused find the acquittal, even in the heinous of the offenses. Can I have the next slide, please? The research also discussed politically and religiously driven cases of forced conversion. Yes, I've already spoken about this slide. Next one, please. I know I have to keep the pace with the time. Yes, the prevailing laws at the moment in Pakistan with respect to the terrorism, violent extremism and criminal cases. First of all, we have the Investigation for Fair Trial Act. The most important aspects of this act related to the cases of terrorism are the right to fair trial. As contemplated under Article 10 of the Constitution, confessional statements should be recorded before the magistrate. Most of the time, confessions are recorded in the police station, which are extrajudicial confessions, and due to extrajudicial confession, the lacuna stays in the case of the prosecution. Identification parades, again, it's a technical issue, and because of the technical lacunas, the accused counsel plays with the technical lacunas to gain advantage over the prosecution side. Next slide, please. I'll discuss, yes, NECTA Act 2013. It is not surprising that even NECTA Act 2013 has remained unable to settle a definitional dispute of the term terrorism. Like I said, the section 6, which is the definitional section of the Terrorism Act 1997 of Pakistan, which basically tells the courts that this is what the definition of terrorism is still unable to define the terrorism in its real sense. Even the Supreme Court has passed the ball to the parliament, to the legislation, to do the legislation effectively the patches of terrorism. Otherwise, the law itself at present is very wide, is vague, and ambiguous at the same time. Next slide, please. Yes, the methodology which was deployed in this research was a primary research, purely qualitative, having the interviews of different stakeholders of the criminal justice system and the legislation that included the president of the Bar Associations of Pakistan, including the Supreme Court, Sindh High Court Bar Association, Supreme Court Bar Association, the members of the police, members of the prosecution department, and also some of the members of the parliament as well. Next slide, please.
Arham, can you come to the finding and conclusion?
Yes, please. Yes. Yeah. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you very much. Well, after a rigorous study, these are basically the findings. The previous slide. The previous slide, please. Thank you very much. First of all, we need to have a strong legislative framework defining the extremism. The term extremism, the term terrorism are still very wide in the Pakistani context. Statutory provisions distinguishing an act of terrorism from extremism is also very important. We do not have any exclusive countering violent extremism law in Pakistan. Unfortunately, the volume of the cases that we have annually, the extremism cases, the terrorism cases, we need to have a centric and most importantly, specifically driven law dealing with the cases of violent extremism. Let's not confuse terrorism with the word violent extremism here. Therefore, the study also concluded that extremism is basically not a national or a federal phenomena. It's more of a provincial phenomena as well, because extremism is very subjective word. Extremism for me might not be extremism for you, and extremism for you might not be extremism for me. Therefore, so many provincial dynamics, the socio-cultural dynamics are involved when we are talking about extremism. Sindh has different dynamics. Balochistan has different dynamics. Therefore, a provincial legislation is the dire need of time. Even in the parliament, we need to have a separate directorate with standing committees in the parliament, standing committee on violent extremism, standing committee directing the proposals of the parliament to be deployed. And most importantly, if we talk about the judgment of the Supreme Court, the judgment the Supreme Court itself speaks of the fact that the parliament must regulate the law in that sense. But unfortunately, despite 3 years has been lapsed, but no such activity and no such progress has been done by the parliament in this regard. Then socio-psychological profiling of the accused person as well. When the accused is brought in the court for the first time, he has been sent for criminal record. If he has been sent for criminal record, why not to have a socio-psychological profiling as well? So to keep a record that what kind of accused persons are coming and in which state of mind. Next slide, please. The role of media and PEMRA is also very important to perpetuate and to curb the term and the laws, and most importantly, discouraging the people from spreading the extremism. Then again, extremism is very subjective. Yes, the role of Council of Islamic Ideology should be curtailed with all due respect. This is for the reason being that one of the respondents told me, and he was the member of the parliament. He told me that normally laws are passed, but when the laws goes to the Council of Islamic Ideology for the scrutiny, whereas the Article 227 of the Constitution of Pakistan says that no law repugnant to the injunctions of Islam can ever be passed. In that way, even in Sindh, despite the law against forced conversion of the minority girls, despite the law was passed, it was never enacted in and supervising educational curriculum in schools and textbook is also very important. Amendment in terms of sentencing and redefining conventional rule of benefit of doubt. This is what I have already discussed. Then investigation by officer not below the rank of superintendent of police. Most importantly, the investigation of the extremism cases are even given to the ASI, or the FIR is written by the head morer, who is the grade 5 officer. How would we expect him to understand the scheme of law behind the Terrorism Act? And he is the gentleman who writes the FIR, and he nominates the person. Next slide, please. Legal and reform committees and district bar associations is very important, because we need to take bar associations on board as well. We have seen this in the recent Sialkot incident of the Sri Lankan manager Priyantha Kumara, and the bar association should have been taken on board when dealing with such cases, because these cases are very important with respect to the security of a country as well. Witnesses cannot retract to the previously given statement. What happens is that because the cases of violent extremism are non-compoundable, that which means that even if the legal heirs of the deceased person forgives the accused person, even then he will not find the acquittal. So what happens is that witnesses come in the court, witnesses tell the judge that, Judge Sahab, we have previously given incorrect statement, and on the basis of that, accused persons find acquittals. Right of appeal may be given to a civil society, the locus standi. Civil society does not at presently have the locus standi to go to the court and to tell the court that this is a matter of extreme civil and social importance, and therefore it may be taken in the court. The court says you don't have any locus standi, you are not related to the deceased person in the case of violent extremism, you cannot lodge the FIR. Then FIR lodged against multiple unknown persons. This also gives the leverage, the benefit to the main accused persons, because the court cannot convict hundreds and 150 of the accused persons. The investigation is not effective and proper in such cases. Civil military bureaucracy is also very important in this regard. Then the role of Law and Justice Commission of Pakistan was also scrutinized by way of this study. It also needs to be very effective. Separate model police station is one of the most important policy recommendation from my side, and exclusive investigation wing for extremist related crimes. We do not have any expertise or any special policing, any expertise or special model police stations in this regard. Next slide, please. And this was one of the reason why a 5-year-old boy was nominated in the FIR of violent extremism in the case that happened in Karak, KPK. Well, this is all, and the appointments of public prosecutors should also be apolitical. E-court system is also very important, for the reason being that witnesses in the cases of violent extremism, they tend to avoid coming to the court. They are basically scared of their life as well. So in that case, the legislation should be prompt, effective, and give them a leverage, a chance, an opportunity to appear online from wherever they are, and they may not appear in the court. They can appear in the court, record their evidence and testimony using the online streaming. And the restructuring of the criminal jurisprudence, like I've already discussed. So yes, in short, this is what has been proposed, and out of a very rigorously conducted comprehensive study. Yes, Dr.
Thank
Saab.
you, Ramsa, for your study and presentation. And we are already short of time. If you have any quick questions, you can ask to the panelists. Chief, from here, first you. Very brief, please. Yeah.
Well, I was listening from the beginning, and I have a question regarding any policies the institutions or organizations like STPI, they have for the Higher Education Commission, specifically the first presenter who talked about the curriculum and adding some civic sense subjects in it. I'm Dr. Sonia Omar. I'm working as Associate Professor in Department of Social Work. We are all the time making curriculums. Recently, I have made a BS program, 4 years program. Whatever ATC guidelines are there, these are ridiculous. So if you guys organize such conferences, why there are no directions, or you sit with the HEC or the policymakers that civic sense or that sort of, why they're not made compulsory in the curriculum when we make it. And quickly, my next question is the leaders who are leading universities, specifically I'm talking about the vice chancellors. The recent policies from the 2014 to 22 right now, there are different policies that from different provinces, like I'm from University of the Punjab, it has been made compulsory for us to, have quota from Balochistan or the other FATA, and that's very fine. That's as diversity. But does the leadership deals with the diversity later? We used to have one group. Now, with the inclusion of so many other students from the other provinces, which is very fine. Now there are 10, 12 ethnic and different groups, and all the time I see the leadership is pressurized to deal with their demands or something like that. What I'm trying to say.
Thank you. Point is
Yeah.
taken. Please be brief, because the time is one question from here, one from the backside, and then respond would be collective. Very brief, please.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
One question.
My name is Zain Fayaz, and I'm from Nabil Islamabad IR department. And my question is on the basis of my confined knowledge. And I consider in this post-truth era, as Pakistan is a victim of fifth generation warfare and or hybrid warfare. And disinformation, I consider, is the one of the major cause of the violent extremism. And what could be the pragmatic solutions to counter the violent extremism? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Salman Khan, and I have a very brief question for Mr. Farhan Zaid Saab. So you talk very comprehensive about violent extremism, but my question is that in a country like Pakistan, which has been affected by war and terror, how would you differentiate extremism from terrorism? Do you think that the extremist group and extremism alternatively led to terrorism? What's your take on it? Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I'm Dr. Nargis Abbas Mirza from University of Sargodha. I have just heard the presentation of Dr. Sayyid Hussain Shahid. It is very strange for me that you explained the path of extremism towards the terrorism. My question is this, is this always the same path towards the terrorism? Or what about those people who have been killed in the attacks, drone attacks, and just kind of injustice means or actions have been done against them? They were not extremists, but they became the terrorist. So there is a role of injustice. कहते हैं ना, justice delayed is no justice, or injustice, justice denied. So what is the role of this phenomenon over here? I don't think so. This line is always true. Extremism leads towards the terrorism. Please ponder some light on it. Thank you.
Hello, sir. Sir, forwardly linked to
On this point, I will respond, and other will respond, the other panelists. Okay, I'll come to your point here last.
Hello, I have two questions, one from my professor, Dr. Arshi, and one from Soharwardi Saab. I just want to ask Soharwardi, he mentioned that ideology or religious ideology much role for the extremism are in the tribal areas of Pakistan. But don't you believe that ideology, in fact, it delimit the enemy and legitimize the violence against the state of Pakistan or against the troops in Afghanistan? And the second question from Dr. Arshi, don't you believe that state-society relationship is important for the counter-violent extremism or community resilience, especially in counter-violent extremism?
Thank you very much for your brilliant question. And now I will revert to my panelists one by one. Farhan Saab, aapko pehle question.
Thank you. Aapka question tha about extremism and terrorism. It's about how do you distinguish. Actually, being an extremist is no crime. It's not a crime. You see, we cannot say that until, for example, you develop such absolutist beliefs you develop a mindset of conspiratorial belief system, and your ideas become Manichaean in approach. So, but you haven't done anything. Like, for example, if you people plan a crime, you people plan to murder someone, but you don't do that. So unless the act is committed, the commission of the act, that is very important. That's what we call mens rea and actus reus in terms of law. So you see, being an extremist, all of us, in one way or other, we have some kind of extremist tendencies in our minds. You see, as those of you who studied psychology, there is no such thing as normal personality. There is no such thing. Everyone has different issues. So being an extremist is not an issue, but being in violence, turning toward violence, is a problem. Many of the people you around you have such beliefs, but they don't resort to violence. So the main issue with us is that we have to counter those violent tendencies, and and have to block and lay hurdles in the path towards them becoming terrorists and perpetrating acts of terrorism. So my answer would be that holding or keeping extremist ideas is not an issue. Is not an issue for us. Everyone has, some kind of tendencies. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A bunch of questions, very important questions. I take one by one, and gentlemen, I have really missed your question. I'll ask you to ask once again. One last question that was asked from me was the ideology against against our against all this taking place across the western border or in Pakistan. All these things are there, but remember that there are numerous reasons. It's not only ideology. This research was exclusively focused on ideology, but politics, political reasons, politically motivated actions, economics, sociology, anthropology, all these things are they are the ones that they instrument, in fact, and make one qualified to go for extremist act. What is happening in United States? A gentleman gets in with a gun and starts killing children in a school, or for that matter, starts killing black people. I mean, that is a psychological, in fact, that factor that orchestrates all this. Although we differentiate between the two, but it is not, in fact. It's ideology, it's economics, it's politics. So it's psychological as well. We do not call this entire phenomena as a terrorist, but actually, in the hearts of the hearts, in terms of the process, it is in fact terrorism. Different ethnic groups, lady has asked questions that they come over and then they do not harmonize with each other. Lady, the problem is that we are really compartmentalized. We are not coming out of our provinces. We do not interact. We do not mix up with each other. That lack of interaction between us, in fact, is making things difficult. Somebody asked, democracy is not working. What should be the solution? And my answer was, give them more democracy. I mean, if students from Balochistan, students from Sindh, they are there in Lahore, in Punjab University, and they're fighting with the people because they had no such experience in their life of interacting with other ethnic communities. Now they are doing that. Honestly, let these 10 years pass and you will see a new face. They will have an understanding of each other. Right now, because we are compartmentalized to our own provinces, we are looking down upon each other. So hopefully that will respond and that will work. I have an example of that there in Peshawar. When people from Afghanistan come over, the first 1 year is really difficult. The next 1 year is so nice and docile with Pakistan. The first 1 year is Pakistan is their enemy. But the next year is so much harmony, so much peaceful interaction with each other that they consider that, well, this is our second home. And the last one, you say that extremism is linked with terrorism, and I am not saying, and it is It's somehow I have not spoken other way around. The reason is this research, I have not gone much into detail. In fact, I have my own limitations. As per limitations, I have carved it out that this is what is the scope of my research work, and I will not go beyond that. And that's why I have not taken any other aspect of the research. Thank you so much, Dr. Jason.
I think one of the questions, there was a direct question, but there was one question about curriculum. Why we don't have, why different provinces have, different approaches and all. I mean, one of the main reasons that, we don't really have it is because of the 18th Amendment. Now, education is a provincial subject. So different provinces, they they are free, whatever their own the cabinet decides and the government decide within that province. So Sindh government has a different approach, and if you look at those textbooks also, some of the things that were recommended, even when they were it's not that we never had a review of the curriculum. I mean, it's very interesting. Post 9/11, we had multiple times, we had committees, starting from General Musharraf's era, but so those committees, they came up with different ideas and different things. Some of the provinces later on, because after 2008, I think, 9/10, when the provinces started, coming up with their own policies. So, so Sindh government actually did make some changes. But then in KP, we found, the government, the national curriculum reverting back to some of the things that was done, the changes that were made during General Musharraf's time, because there was this policy that you have to sort of open up and make it more sort of democratic or inclusive. But then again, it was thought that it is not something which is as per the values of the province. So as long as the education is remains a provisional subject, you will find this diversity. But there is nothing wrong in that, because you cannot really have single curriculum for the entire country, especially in a multi-ethnic, sectarian society also, where you have different approaches. The point is that you have to have that, the object, what is your objective, ultimate objective. And if that ultimate objective is that that the syllabus should be inclusive, and whatever different groups who live in the province, they should not feel marginalized or discriminated. The subjects should not be selected, and the text or the content should not be should not reflect that they are against one minority or specifically targeting or mentioning. Besides that, you don't really have one or single curriculum anywhere in the world. These are the key components. And when I said peace education, actually, I mean, it's not necessary that you introduce peace education with the same tag or with the same thing, that you are introducing peace education as a course. I mean, it's the content that have to be aligned and designed, keeping in mind. So what you are actually trying to tell at the school level, the high school level, the college level, and the university level, how the students, they are, sort of, they're made to see things from which lens. So it's a positive, constructive lens with the critical eye, that they are trying to analyze things, or they are told that these are the things, these are the boundaries, you have to follow that. So peace education is not about some peace initiatives or in that context. It is more than that. It is more social, inclusive approach, constructive approach. The second question about the state society relationship, I think when we talk about good governance, what are we referring to? We are referring to a positive relationship between the state and society. And when I say people-centric approach should be adopted, that does not mean that it's only people who would be deciding. Of course, as long as the state system remains there, there has to be a government, there has to be a framework where the unit of analysis remains state, and the power to use or the authority to use violence is still remain within the state as long as that structure is there. But then within that, the nature of the relationship, so it's the social contract that we talk about again and again. And we need to see that social contract, how, again, how inclusive, how good that social contract, or if there is a social contract. So it's the citizenship that is important, because you are a citizen of a country, and you will, or you are entitled to all the rights, or other identity markers are going to define where you actually stand. So you belong to that particular community, this particular sect, you will have more rights, not written in practice, but this is something that has created problem. So the relationship can obviously be a progressive, positive relationship when when the citizenship is the only marker. So you're born in a country, or you have acquired the citizenship of a country, that should define your status. When you have other markers, then obviously those are exploited. And then the majoritarian and the majoritarian approach, and then the minority versus the majority issues, they go on. So that is.
Thank you, Dr. Saba. Now, Dean, if you have any one-liner at the end, because we are already, the time is short, so we are moving. I do not want to be in between lunch and the people. So any one-liner from your side, you and Khalid Sab.
Thank you
for
very
staying
much.
for long, till late night. Yeah, we realize it. Thank you for that. Yeah, okay, please carry on.
Fantastic opportunity. Thank you very much. To do a quick one-liner, Dr. Shafkat, a lot came up and some in the chat, gender, other issues as well, extremism versus terrorism. I'll start to send over different bits of knowledge and information from other examples of other global case studies that we can put onto the CRN net, so everyone will have examples of it. Sudan has excellent examples of gender mainstreaming and CVE. Operation Safe Corridor in Nigeria. It's worked with rehabilitation, counter terrorism issues, as well as reintegration. Would be a fantastic. Uganda has excellent examples of a religiously plural society experiencing extremism across several different religions. We talked about extremism leading to terrorism. For those who want to research it, some of the older research talks about a ladder. And there are 5 different steps in that ladder: a grievance, real or perceived, emergence of leaders, historical grievances, and us-them narrative, a rationalization towards violence before the act itself. And I think we're learning a bit that language matters. Extremism is not inherently bad, violence is. Extremism can have, there are positive aspects of extremism. A hunger strike is a very extreme way to protest. It is not a violent means to do so. And the same is true for the use of the word radicalization. There are figures historically who've been very radical and extraordinarily peaceful in their approach to seeking social change. So we should keep that in mind. Lastly, and this was pointed to by one of our esteemed panelists, another doctor, there is a difference between someone's attitude towards extremism and the behavior they exhibit. And when we look at PCVE, we should be asking ourselves, do we want to affect someone's attitude, or do we want to affect their behavior? And that has a lot to do with how we approach these socially and the way we go through with research. Other than that, I just want to thank everyone for giving me this opportunity to speak and to be part of this project, and for continued work with SDPI. Thank you, Dr. Shafkat. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dean. Khalid Sab, quickly.
So yeah, now only one liner from me is that, for civic education thing, Dr. Saba just mentioned that after 18th Amendment is provincial subject. She's very right. And in my opinion, all stakeholders of society, civil society, the politicians and everything, they have to work bottom up to bring the demand side to include civic education in the curriculum, because that is how it's going to happen, because whatever is the demand side is going to be part of it. the curriculum and everything is decided by the provincial governments or provincial level, and that has to be on the bottom up, and every stakeholder have to work on that. It's not easy. It's a longer process, but it's going to happen one day.
Thank you, Khalid Saab. And Saeed Saab, over to you for vote of thanks. Quick.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Shafqat Saab. Just to sum it up, I think since many of the students are sitting here, I think one of a good recommendations is to read a very old book from a controversial writer, Samuel P. Huntington. If you read his 1968 publication, Political Order in Changing Societies, where he explains that state has three important roles: extractive, judicative, and distributive. If these functions of the state fail, there will be a chaos. And I think in Pakistan, these three functions, state has failed in these three functions. So I think extremism and violent extremism is a development issue for Pakistan, is a development challenge. When the political modernization happened, old bonds, old societal institutions deteriorate and new institutions have to replace them. But here in Pakistan, the old bonds and institutions have deteriorated. New institutions have not been able to replace them. And that's why there is a mismatch between the demand from the public for extractive, adjudicative, and redistributive capacity of the state. And I think that is, so I would rather say that all these societal things and the political issues is a state challenge. So thank you very much. It was a wonderful afternoon. Hopefully you are taking things along for further research and further discussion with your colleagues, with your classmates. Thank you very much, all of the distinguished speakers and Shafqat Saab and SDPI. Thank you very much. And also our online participants. Thank you very much.
And I would like to thank here SDPI team, particularly my team, Awais, Salman, and our technical team, our IT team, all are in Ali and Ramsha. They are also reporting. Yeah, Saima and all, as a lot of team members here working is a group photo request for the panelists here. Yeah, quickly. And thank you very much for your active participation, question, answer. Thank you so much.